Hi everyone, I thought it was time that we had a little look into stats to do with my reading. I have spent the last few days getting my Storygraph set up because my Goodreads was refusing to export, probably because I have far too many books on my to-read list on there. So on Storygraph, I am not going to be adding anything on my to-read there. I'm just going to track just the books I've read. And I'm going to find that really quite refreshing after the whole Goodreads situation that I've got myself into, which is thousands of books on a TBR that I don't know what I own of and what I don't. So let's go and jump into the stats. So I hadn't really necessarily thought about which stats I actually want to show you on here. But I think the most interesting place for us to look at might actually end up being genre across the years. So this is what I see when I look at just 2021. And you can see that we have 31 books read, that's over 11,000 pages. And that I mainly pick up fast books. That's something that, oh no, fast and medium are currently equal. You'll find that over other years, I do tend to gravitate more towards fast-paced books. That's something I've always known anyway. Other years, this figure is skewed more, the page number one. So it's rare for me to pick up a book over 500 pages. There's always a few each year, but there's never loads. My most common bracket in my head is 300 and 499. The problem is a lot of the books on here are either referenced incorrectly in terms of their page numbers and I don't care enough to request to fix them, or I have also found that because I've read over the years so many comics, graphic novels, novellas, short stories, they really actually eat into this and have a bit of an effect on it. Never mind. The fiction and non-fiction each year tends to be around this sort of figure. Non-fiction definitely never makes it to more than about a third of the pie. Probably a quarter actually. So if we're going to look at genres, this year, my most read genre is thriller, which I'm a bit surprised by because I don't feel like I've read many thrillers this year yet at all. Same with young adult, bit surprised by that, and mystery. Fantasy, I am expecting to see up there because I've been making a conscious effort to try and read more fantasy. Romance makes sense because I've been reading some Tess Dare. And then everything else is pretty low. But the thing that shocks me is, for years now, I have been saying, oh, I want to increase the amount of fantasy books that I read. I don't read enough fantasy. Well, let's look into that a little deeper, shall we? If we look at my all-time, well, just ignore the moods bit, because I think that's a bit kind of ridiculous anyway, and I don't get why there's so much in adventurous. But yeah, if we look at our all-time, there we go, we have the fast showing up now. The page number thing, as I said, looks a bit skewed. I think it should be skewed a bit more this way personally. That's as expected. But this surprised me at first until I thought more about it. So my top rated genre, although I wouldn't necessarily call it a genre myself, is YA. Second place, not very far behind I might add, is fantasy. Now what I don't get is why fantasy is that high. Or at least I didn't get it until I really properly looked at everything that I'd logged in and realised that this makes it look like I've read a lot of fantasy and makes everything else look quite low, when in fact I haven't. This has been boosted mainly from reading a lot of Shadowhunter books, because I read a lot of the short stories as individual short stories, and so that really bumped this number up. This is also being bumped up from the likes of Harry Potter, just a lot of series that I picked up when I was younger, for example a lot of middle grade series too, and even as I got older, like for example the Magisterium series. These are all bumping this fantasy box up. But in theory, I don't feel like fantasy should be there, so I would like you to ignore that. So mystery I would have thought would be up here. I would also expect thriller to be up here. I'm surprised at romances, and it makes me wonder just what they are categorizing as romance. So let's have a look. See, I'd call this historical fiction, but I guess it did have a bit of romance in. This is fair, totally fair. Dear Emmy Blue is also totally fair. I mean, I feel like Northanger Abbey is stretching it to the limits, personally. A Sister's Gift. I don't remember any romance in that book at all. I definitely wouldn't describe Even Man as a romance. Everything, fair enough. The Rosie Project, fair enough. Forever Interrupted, fair enough. These are all fair enough. Let me find one where I actually disagree with it again. It might be a little while, because I do read a bit of romance. I mean, I guess. But all the same, I suppose so. But again, I feel like it just wouldn't be one of the things that I'd describe Jane Eyre as. I mean, there's romance in Clockwork Princess, but Jesus, it would not be one of my top kind of suggestions for genre of it. And so this is why my romance stuff is looking so high, because it's just got stuff skewing it, which makes me really sad because I was really excited. Like, this, I would not call Finale a romance. That should have, like, fantasy in that place. I mean, don't get me wrong, it probably is listed on fantasy too, but it bothers me that that is higher placed. This, again, historical fiction, I would never, ever count this as a romance. And so, as I was saying, this is really just sad for me. I was so looking forward to being able to delve into my stats on Storygraph. I'd heard so many great things, but I just found myself getting really annoyed by it. It's still really interesting, but I would not call Illuminae a romance. I don't remember what that was about anymore, so I can't argue that one. That is definitely fair enough, as is that. Clockwork Prince, no. I think there might have been a very kind of background romance in this one, but it definitely wasn't the focus by any means. I just really question some of these and what they have been categorized by. Like I said, some of them are totally fair enough, but others I'm just like, what? And so actually, while I'm on my little rant, let's go and look at fantasy. So you can see how fantasy has ended up being so high on my list of all time. And I mean, I guess all of these genuinely apply as fantasy, but whenever I go on in videos going, oh, I need to read more fantasy, I don't really think about some of these being fantasy. I know that the majority are, but they're kind of not really what I mean, I suppose, is the point. And some of these, I am very ashamed that you're seeing that I've read. I don't think I'd call House of Leaves a fantasy. I've seen other people call it that. I wouldn't. But some of these are cute children's books, or me delving into adult fantasy. That's fine. Some of them I don't even remember anymore because I read them years ago. Some of them I read them years ago and actually really enjoyed. Like, this was a surprise. Stand out. Hidden gem. Check this one out. But yeah, I don't know. Obviously, a lot of these I would keep in the fantasy genre. if I was categorizing these myself. And so I guess I have read a lot more fantasy than what I ever realized. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that this isn't necessarily what I mean by I want to read more fantasy. I definitely want to dive into more adult fantasy. There's barely of that in this list. And I just want to dive into more YA fantasy rather than hopping in the same kind of couple of authors circles. Get a bit more variety on the go. I mean, I'm still scrolling. This is ridiculous. There's so many. Some of them I just hadn't even considered either, like Lumberjanes. I'd kind of not really thought about them as being fantasy, but yeah, I guess they are. But yeah, that will do us for those. I mean, oh, I was at the bottom anyway at that point. Let's go back to the stats. So mystery, after looking at this, I've decided in the next couple of years I want to really focus on reading more adult stuff, more fantasy, but specifically adult fantasy, more mystery books. Romance can stay about the same. A lot more thriller books. Children's, I don't really mind. Contemporary can maybe boost a bit. It's been ages since I've binged any sort of comic or graphic novel series, so maybe pick up a few more of those, but not loads, because that brings the page count down. Crime and horror, I'd like to get those boosted a bit more. I don't pick up nearly enough classics anymore either. Sci-fi, I definitely want to get more into. I really like short stories, so I don't really mind with where that is. I'd like to boost historical and middle grade a bit more. Biography looks quite low, but I probably do read enough of those overall as well, I'd say. And all these I'd like to just, for the most part anyway, I mean, I'm not that bothered about self-help, but for the most part, I'd like to boost all of these bottom ones a little bit more too. But let's go looking at individual years. I'm trying to think what year I started tracking from. I bet this was the first year. Looking at the fact that it's YA and fantasy, I'm pretty sure these are just the, Vampire Diaries books. Don't recommend them, by the way. One of those examples where the series is much better than the books. Much better. That said, I never did read them all, and I did buy them all because I'm an idiot. So I probably will actually do some fun reading content of those at some point. So 2013. As I said, we're just going to carry on ignoring this because I don't like this. So pace, I went for more medium paced books back then. We've got the 300 to 499 bit that I would expect. Non-fiction's a decent chunk. How is romance my most read genre of that year? Like, hello? Oh, so this is the year where we count a book that definitely isn't a bloody romance. And then we've got some shopaholic books and a couple of other things. That makes more sense. So generally speaking, other than romance being ridiculously high up, and these now tying, everything else is kind of in check. I don't think my reading tastes really have changed all that much through the years, as we will see if we go to 2014. Again, the pace is back to fast. Pages, there's not that much between those. Non-fiction's about the same amount. And this time, mystery, crime, and thriller have won out over the romance. And historicals creeped up a little bit more. What did we get that was historical that year? Don't remember that as being historical, but okay. That's fine though. fantasy really low that year, probably because I didn't go around rereading Harry Potter and trying to read 500 billion Shadowhunter books. So if we go to 2015, this is the year where BookTube really kicked into my reading, I'd like to point out. So let's see if we see anything majorly different here. Because again, we'll ignore that. The Fast is winning, but I'm not surprised by that. This is probably the biggest difference that you will see on any of the years. And this is caused by me discovering this year that comics and graphic novels are such a big thing. And so they took over a bit, and my non-fiction struggled a little bit. They are also what boost my fantasy a lot and my young adult. And then even science fiction, that's a very high figure for me. But that is simply caused by the graphic novels. In fact, if we click that, let's see what we have in there. Okay, that was some sort of short story audiobook thing I listened to. Same for that. Then we have Saga, Frankenstein, Strange Case of Dr. Mr. Hyde. They'll have both been audiobooks. And here we have the kind of graphic novel influence. So Invisible Republic, I don't remember that anymore. Descender, I remember that and really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought there would be, I was going to say, I thought there'd be more graphic novels than this. So Saga 1 and 2 as well. But yeah, there was quite a lot of sci-fi for me in one year. Mystery's really low that year, sadly, along with thriller. Quite sad about those. But everything else about where I'd expect it to be. So let's see, 2016. Pace, similar situation. Page number thing has possibly got a bit worse actually than the year before. But again, I know exactly why for this year, because this is the year where I picked up all the Shadowhunter books. And more graphic novels and comics. She says. Have I now remembered the wrong year? I mean, we do have some shorter and some longer reads mixed in among here, along with some graphic novels and things. But I really thought this was the year where I read a lot of the short stories for Shadowhunters. Maybe not then. But look at those two going hand in hand. And also comics. That is the year, again, where comics went boom. And I think this is the only place, really, that I can say that BookTube has changed my reading. I wouldn't have picked up barely any, if any, of these on my own, I don't think. Maybe this one, because it was very hyped up. But the rest of them, I'm not sure that I would ever have picked up, read, even known of, if it wasn't for BookTube. And I think that's the only place we'll really see any differences. BookTube has not changed my reading, except for introducing me to more comics and graphic novels and temporarily adjusting this page count somewhat, and occasionally making my non-fiction drop a bit as a result of me checking some of these other things out. But generally speaking, everything else just always stays in the same sort of pattern, which I guess at least leaves me with consistency. I've been a consistent reader over the years in terms of the genres. And the pacing has been pretty consistent too. Oh, that was a year where I really didn't pick up chunky books. Just 2 over 500 pages. I wonder what those two were. Fair. So, again, nothing really shocking there. This will definitely have been the year of short stories for Cassandra Clare books. she says as she just keeps seeing loads of lumberjanes. Okay, I don't have a clue what year that was then. Oh no, there's one. There was one. Okay. And finally, last year, again, nothing really changed. I picked up a few more chunkier books, probably because of being furloughed for part of the year. But everything else has stayed looking pretty much the same, to be honest. And that has brought us to a close. So I hope this was kind of interesting to look at. And if there's anything else you want me to dive deeper into in terms of stats as I slowly start filling in Excel sheets in the future, for example, so I can track other aspects of my reading, because I am really quite into the charts now and want more. But yeah, if you would like me to, please let me know in the comments down below. Just drop me a note with what you'd like me to fill you in with. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video and found it insightful. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe by clicking the image of me if you want to see more book reviews and other bookish content from me, and I will see you soon. Bye bye!